Hello everybody. Today's video was originally going to be a how-to video about how to catch a tarpon on a standard style paddle kayak, one without even a rudder, just a bare bones kayak. For that I was using my Wilderness Systems Tarpon 140, and I did get hooked up to a tarpon. Unfortunately, my head mount GoPro, the one that I capture my audio with, died on me, and it just corrupted all my files, and I think it's rest in peace, but I gotta see if I can fix it. But fortunately, about a third of the way in of the fight I was able to get my overhead GoPro on, and that's where the majority of this filming will be. Now, after I got the initial bite, I always do is the first 10 or 15 seconds I just dedicate to just focus on surviving, keeping hooked up, and what that is that initial bite they're going to go crazy, start jumping, spinning, sprinting, jumping, spinning, sprinting, okay? And the key is you want to be able to survive that first 10 seconds, because if you survive that first 10 seconds your chances of staying on them are considerably higher. Make sure that you're pointing the rod towards them, you have the rod tip up, and then you're ready to bow when they jump, so that gives them a little bit of flex. Adjusting your drag so you're not too much. You kind of want a little bit lighter drag than you would normally think for the initial run, and then later on you can start tightening down on the drag once you get things situated. So once it finishes jumping and now it's just sprinting away from me and it's burning drag, that's when I take the time to get myself situated. If I start reeling in my secondary rod, putting things away so they're out of the way, unhooking my quick release anchor system, which is a total mandatory for big tarpon, because you can't waste time trying to undo a knot or some sort of clip. You need to be able to just flick yourself off and be free floating. Now the next part of it to key in on is the wind and the current. With a kayak, when we have some good extensive wind like I had that day, it instantly turns you sideways, especially when you don't have a rudder. So it'll automatically push you perpendicular to the wind, so you're sideways to the wind. And in this situation, because the current was going opposite the wind, the fish of course went directly up current, and the wind was blowing the opposite way, so I was in the worst circumstances. I was pushed sideways against the wind and against the fish, and that was a bad situation. To make it worse, while I was reeling in my second line, a big barracuda grabbed that one and started taking off in the opposite direction. In the end, I guess it might have maybe helped straighten me out, but that whole time, fortunately, I had that rod in the rear built-in rod holders, so if it was in my milk crate ones, it would have snapped that off and took that rod, but it was bowed over and staying on. But if you watch the video, in the first part of it, because I had so much line out there, I wasn't able to straighten the kayak out using the rod. So the way I did it was I took the paddle, put it across my lap, and you don't have the ability to use two hands, so what I would do is I would dip the paddle face into the water on the side that I wanted to turn. In most of these instances I needed to go left, so what I would do is I would dip the left hand paddle face into the water. As momentum was carrying me forward, although perpendicular, that drag and torque would cause the front of the kayak to turn left, and eventually got me to the point where I was facing the fish. And then at that point I was able to use the drag and pump and wind, which basically doesn't put a lot of pressure on the fish, but it pulls the kayak closer to the fish. And because I was so far out for such a long time, I was just using that paddle on my lap and just dipping into whatever side I needed to turn. Now eventually, as I got closer, then I was able to get to the point where I could just use the fishing pole to turn the kayak and to make my alterations as needed. And the way I would do that is that I would point the shaft of the rod straight forward to the tip of the kayak, and then I would sweep the rod in the opposite direction that I wanted to turn. So like I said, in most instances I needed to turn left. I would basically point the rod forward and then I would sweep to the right, and that pressure would cause the kayak front to go to the left. And that's how I would make my adjustments to whichever the way the fish went. I would just go the opposite way and hold it out front. The third part you'll see me doing is that when I got it to the point where I was almost right above it, it was equivalent to where the kayak was, and it would start doing the dodging right underneath the kayak. To make those quick turns, what I would do is actually use the rod against the front of the kayak, not the line side, but the rod side, butted against the kayak front, and that drag would basically whip that front across very quickly. Once I was fairly turned towards the fish, then I would lift up and then go back to fighting it, and that would keep me pointed towards the fish. Now the other part of it is you'll watch me as the view that you get from the overhead is actually pretty good for this, is that you'll see that I stay squared front. I'm not twisting, I'm not leaning. The core of my body always stays forward, and I use that rod tip to make my turns, not my body. And that will prevent the rollovers of getting perpendicular with the fish, pulling side to side rather than front to back. Okay, if you stay front to back, you can't flip. If you start getting weird angles, then you're going to get flipped, especially when you're dealing with a 100-pound tarpon that's going crazy. So anyways, that's the key points I kind of wanted to go over on the video. As you can see it there, I did get the tarpon leadered and wrapped in almost the point that I could grab it. It just did one too many head shakes right when I was ready to grab its face, and eventually broke off, but it was no big deal. Ended up taking me about 2 miles and over 30 to 40 minute long fight, so it was a long one. But anyways, that is that. Hope you guys liked the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video. Bye.